We've talked about shifting the emphasis from aid to enterprise and from poverty alleviation to wealth creation. In this session, we're going to focus on enterprise solutions to poverty. We're also going to focus on the human person, who's the source of prosperity. When we understand people made in the image and likeness of God with creative capacity, it changes absolutely everything about the way we understand wealth and poverty. Changing our focus from aid to enterprise transforms even the way we think about charity. This is illustrated in the story of Hope International, founded by entrepreneur Jeff Rutt. I had the chance to sit down with Peter Greer, the CEO of Hope International, and hear their story.
Jeff, like many people after the fall of the Soviet Union, saw that this was a turning point in history, and they saw that there were incredible needs. And so Jeff and his church in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, initially wanted to help. They ended up giving away food, clothes, anything that they could think of to help meet the immediate needs after the fall of the Soviet Union in a town in Zaporozhye, Ukraine. And after they did that for about 2 years, there was a pastor in the city, his name was Pastor Petrenko, and he pulled Jeff aside on one of these trips and he said, "Your help is hurting." And initially, Jeff was really taken by that, thinking, what do you mean? We're here helping you. We're doing our model of help, which is you have needs, we have in abundance, and so we're going to give things away to you. And Pastor Petrenko realized that there were problems of dependency, there were problems in distribution, there were problems in even identifying the families that really had the needs and those that were just trying to get another handout. And so this comment from Pastor Petrenko, instead of that really causing Jeff to say, well, it's too difficult to help, we tried, let's go somewhere else, he really rolled up his sleeves and said, let's think more creatively about how we help address the problem of poverty. And what they found is that there were individuals in that town that had gifts, that had abilities, that didn't need another handout. They just needed the opportunity to start a small business. And so they started providing training, they started providing access to small loans, and really found that this model of providing capital and training in the hands of the poor really can make a much longer term impact than just the previous model of just let's hand out another gift, hand out another bag of rice.
Hope International now operates in more than a dozen countries. It's one of a growing number of organizations doing what's called microfinance.
Microfinance provides financial services to the poorest of the poor. It involves, among other things, extending loans sometimes as small as $20 or $30 so that people can start businesses, generate income for their families, and begin the climb out of poverty. In many cases, over 90% of the borrowers are women.
If I'm empowered with financial support to work and take care of my family, I can pay for health service, I can pay for school, I can do this and do that. All this brings about developments.
Microfinance has done a lot of good, but even its greatest proponents agree it has to be done right. Otherwise, if you just lend money, people can actually be worse off than they were before.
There are a lot of problems in the microcredit movement itself. The definition of microcredit is being misused by many people. Anything under the sun is called as microcredit. So you need to clarify yourself. What do you mean by microcredit?
What distinguishes microfinance, say, from the moneylender or the more modern variant of that, the consumer credit outfit, is exactly this merchant banking aspect. That as a microfinance institution, you have to know the business of your client. Now, if you don't watch what the money is used for, then chances are a large part of it is going to be used for consumption. And if you borrow to consume, you're not richer at the end, you're poorer, because you have to repay the loan and high interest on top of it. And so, what makes a microfinance institution really worth its name is the ability to detect among the thousands and thousands that would gratefully accept a loan, those that will become productive with that loan, that can turn that loan into value and better their lives. It's not easy to do, but that good microfinance institution, that's exactly what it does.
Damian von Stauffenberg founded MicroRate, a company that rates the effectiveness of microfinance institutions around the world. What he's found is that the best microfinance strategies emphasize a holistic approach. Ibo Graham, a project manager at the Hopeline Institute in Ghana, echoes the same idea.
Hopeline is a microfinance NGO. We have about 2,500 members. Every person who registers with Hopeline will have to go through a month of training on business management, bookkeeping. They have to understand insurance because we'll give them micro insurance. They have to understand what savings is. We're teaching them how to save. If you save, you can be empowered.
If all we're doing is extending credit to the poor, if all we're doing is giving individuals another access to a form of a credit card, there's going to be no lasting change. I think savings are critically important. I think training is critically important. I think microinsurance is critically important. And I think the fourth leg of this aspect of spiritual poverty has to be addressed. And it's only when you're addressing all of those collectively that you're going to see significant change occur.
We are a Christian organization. That's why we are spending time in educating them on how to spend and use money. We are supporting them through microfinance, but we are reaching them through evangelism and all those things for them to understand that this is business is a mission. You understand me? And they have to go through it in the Lord's way. And in handling that money, and you practice what we've taught you, you will succeed.
There's a lot of enthusiasm for microfinance because it's a tangible way you can help someone begin the climb out of extreme poverty. But long-term sustainable development requires something more. The next step on the ladder are small and medium-sized enterprises, or what are called SMEs. SMEs are companies that employ somewhere between 5 and 500 people, and they play an extremely important role in the development of economies.
We need to move people from the micro to the SME level. If you move the people from micro to SME level with lower interest rate, the economy will do better and people can live and move out of poverty.
Research suggests that for every dollar put into an SME, through a loan or through an investment, we create $12 in the local economy. That equation, even if it's half of that, is so good that we should really focus on how do you get these small and medium-sized companies to grow.
In prosperous countries, about 95% of all companies are small and medium-sized companies. And they employ somewhere around 65% of the entire workforce in places like Europe or America.
If you look at a distribution in prosperous countries, you see that most companies are small and medium-sized. If you look at that same distribution in emerging markets, in poor countries, you see that there's a lot of very small companies and a few very large companies and nobody in the middle. This is called the missing middle. And that is so important because that middle is what creates prosperity.
Entrepreneurs throughout the world all face challenges getting their businesses off the ground. But in the developing world, SME entrepreneurs face the especially difficult challenge of getting access to credit, sometimes having to pay over 100% annual interest for a small business loan. Nobody can build a business with interest rates like that.
When I was in Ghana, I visited with Charles Menz, a young entrepreneur who faces this very problem.
I used to have a sound that would I started a small company, started pineapple juice with 4 or 5 workers, including myself. And I've come to this stage where I have 15 workers, and at peak season up to 20 workers. At this stage, it's more difficult because you can't move to the middle stage that you really can make some money. Because now you need to access sizable amounts of money, which family cannot get, or friends cannot get, and you have to pay those interest rates. It will kill your business. In Ghana, we have small microfinancing companies that tend to lend out to market women, small shops. That microfinancing companies, we have a lot of them in the system. Then there are the big banks who tend to lend out to big companies. So there's a gap. There's a gap between the small and the large scale big companies. But in between them, we don't have those who want to lend out to the SMEs. They put all the papers around that, oh, blah, 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 SMEs come for loan. You go there, they don't give it to you. The process is so long. Plus, you definitely are not going to get it. For someone like me who doesn't have a land in pocket, who doesn't have a land or a house.
Small and medium-sized enterprises are a critical part in the development process because they provide employment to the poor on a long-term basis. They are part of the communities that the poor live in. When communities receive, trucks of United Nations aid, food programs, it only goes so far, for so long. But when you have a local business that's thriving, that's employing people, that's enabling employees to send their kids to school, to change their habitat, to get health benefits and so on, this is what really transforms communities.
We're here in Nairobi visiting Eva Mariah, an entrepreneur and recognized leader in business innovation. In 2001, she co-founded Color Creations, a production and design firm. After building a successful business, she stepped down from the day-to-day activities in 2010 to found BSD, a brand strategy and development firm.
In building her company, Eva had to compete with free clothing shipped as aid, a challenging business climate, and a great personal calamity.
I lost my husband through a fatal motor accident, and this experience really brought home some of the things that he had often shared with me. He was an entrepreneur, and he had always told me that wealth would be created when you create opportunities to acquire and build assets. So when he died, there I was having to think, the risk associated with me starting up on my own, and I have a 6-year-old and a 2.5-year-old girl to look after. There was significant risk that the decision to leave formal employment and start up on my own presented. But notwithstanding, I was very convinced that the way to add value to my family, the way to have positive impact in my community and society was if I started to build a business.
Eva and her partners built a screen printing and apparel company that's expanded into Uganda, Tanzania, Sudan, and Rwanda, employing more than 80 people directly and creating additional employment for thousands of others.
It is the way it was meant to be, for us to leverage our communities out of poverty. People have the dignity of putting food on their table, shelter, health is provided, education is provided for their children. We begin to say no to poverty and begin to redeem the dignity of the citizens by virtue of creating business opportunity.
Eve is one of the winners of the Pioneers of Prosperity Award, an initiative of the Seven Fund, founded by Michael Fairbanks and Andreas Widmer. The Seven Fund promotes enterprise solutions to poverty and connects investors to promising businesses throughout the developing world.
Banks in the developing world are so monopolized and so regulated, they're so beholden to the government that they basically are in the business to lending money to the government. And so when an SME comes along and they want to borrow money, they get money. I've heard of, just the other day, I heard of somebody, they said over 1 year, they ended up paying 80% interest. You can't run a business like that. That's not a business loan, that's usury.
That's what the Seven Fund is designed to address. They look for small, promising companies, partner with them, invest in them, and connect them with others. These are companies that are doing good things, doing it well and competitively, but they need a partner with capital. Partners Worldwide pursue similar work in promoting investment. They also cultivate mentoring partnerships, both internationally and among entrepreneurs in their own countries. Charles Menz, for example, is mentoring an aspiring juice entrepreneur. Now, the goal is to transform not only businesses, but lives and communities, and to scale the effort through networks at a grassroots level.
We're going to form relationships, binational relationships, small, medium, and large businesses, vary in size, but they're going to be Christian business people. And we're going to focus on building businesses that honor God. We call that now business as ministry. We're going to focus on how the businesses are run, but our purpose is to create sustainable jobs, jobs that give dignity and wealth to families to provide in their community. And we'll focus on access to capital, we'll focus on technology transfer, we'll focus on advocating for a level playing field. We'll promote trade between our countries. We went to Kenya and met with business people, and Simon Ngiro, one of the guys in that meeting, he was kind of the classic target business because he had 30 employees. And we said, man, if we could have 10,000 Simons around the world and we can grow it from 30 employees to 50 or 100, we'll impact a lot of people. So we said to Simon, are there other people like you in your community? He said, oh, yeah. And he formed, within 6 months, he formed the first, what we call our affiliates, the Christian Entrepreneur Savings Society, CHESS. And so today they have over 400 business members, and they do provide access to capital, but they do training, networks, trade shows, and we have a team here in the U.S. that partners with them, and they leverage their impact. That's what we have all over the world now.
Some of the reasons people tend to be wary of business as a solution to poverty is they think that corporations exploit people, and sometimes they do. They also tend to think that the economy is a zero-sum game.
The zero-sum game is one of the great economic fallacies. It assumes that if one person gets rich, it must mean that someone else gets poorer. Well, that's reliant upon a static view of wealth. It's like a pie, the idea that there's just one pie and the pie can't grow. In market economies, in dynamic, open economies, what you find is that the pie grows. And this is very important because what that means is that everyone can start to get out of poverty.
The zero-sum game fallacy can also lead to confusion about the role of population in development. The whole concept of enterprise solutions to poverty is rooted in a vision of the human person as creative. We don't just consume stuff, we produce. Now, if you miss this and end up in a zero-sum game fallacy, it can lead to destructive policies that end up promoting population control instead of promoting enterprise.
One of the big fallacies, economic fallacies that flows from the zero-sum game is the way that you start to think about people. You stop thinking about them as potential creators. Instead, you start thinking about them as just mere mouths. What that means, of course, is that you start looking at human beings and seeing them as a burden rather than something that can be inherently creative. And that leads to population control policies. Many people have heard of the Millennium Development Goals, which are supposed to be realized by 2015. But what many people don't realize is that one of the goals implicit to that is, of course, the control of population. They're very explicit about this. And the means by which they do so, unfortunately, includes, for example, abortion. And this manifests itself in all sorts of very strange ways. For example, it manifests in what many people call the daughter deficit. Because in many developing countries, when people have to choose what type of children they were going to have, be it a boy or a girl, for all sorts of cultural reasons, they will choose boys, which means that in many developing countries, there's a huge imbalance in the gender ratio between boys and girls. In other words, girls, women, are the ones who are most negatively affected when it comes to population control policies associated with the Millennium Development Goals. And what's even more tragic, I think, is that some Christian organizations have actually signed on to these goals.
This daughter deficit, or what The Economist magazine has called gendercide, is the result of bad economics there's no correlation between population and poverty. It's also the result of a surrender of the Christian commitment to the dignity of all human life. Now, Christians have been the greatest force for charity and for wealth creation that the world has ever seen. Yet instead of taking leadership, too often we signed on to popular campaigns that are rooted in a false understanding of the human person. This is a lost opportunity for Christians to promote a vision of development rooted in sound economics and a proper understanding of the person. It's time to think and lead like Christians.
Many institutions also look at human life as a threat to social progress, let's say through population control schemes, forced sterilizations. Those are impediments to social justice because they don't allow individuals to live freely. They don't allow the most primary institution of society, the family, to grow and prosper.
We in Africa are resisting some of these conditionalities. And these are conditionalities that are coming from a certain philosophy, a certain cultural philosophy, which we think are contrary to what we believe in. And this is where I believe that they force it down our governments through the IMF, the same culture. They force it down our governments through bilateral arrangements and agreements. They force it down our throats by offering medical facilities that only go contrary to the culture of life. They lead us into the culture of death. They go contrary to the civilization of love.
Some people, in the name of preserving human life and causing society to flourish, think that we need to limit others. We need to limit the amount of life in the world, and we need to take away the mystery. Christians have to be absolutely committed to life. And what that means is that they can't fall prey to the secular arguments about scarcity. We have to understand that we have been given the creative potential to bring not only new life into the world, but new life out of broken things, broken cultures, broken fields, broken families. And we need to be better stewards of how we teach or equip people to think about that.
History has demonstrated with indisputable clarity that people can grow the pie of wealth and discover new sources of wealth through enterprise and innovation. Now, this insight is foundational for working with the poor because it reminds us that people, created in the image of God, are not the problem. People are the solution.
Bangladesh was a food shortage country. We needed food from everywhere to feed our 75 million people. That's why we had a big famine in 1974, where our story begins. Today, Bangladesh, with 144 million people, is a food surplus country.
When I was a graduate student 30 years ago, the received wisdom in every single book you would open suggested that China and India would never, ever be self-sufficient in food, particularly in India. And when I left graduate school, the absolute certain sense from the best thinkers in the world was it was only a matter of time till there would be political upheaval in India, the population would outrun the ability of the land to produce sufficient food, and that we'd never see the development of any wealth in India at all. Now, I was just in India. If one looks in India today, you see not just food self-sufficiency. The fact is, in India exports food, for heaven's sakes. India has a teeming population, and there's a growing sense that population growth is actually good for economic growth.
Human beings are not animals. Animals are the ones who go around and look for food all day and then get tired and sleep, and the next day begins in search of food. Human beings are created for a much bigger mission, to take care of the whole planet and take it forward.
A human being is much more than a mouth that consumes. A human being is a mind that creates and that produces. And if we annihilate human beings in their creativity, either we repress their creativity or we snuff them out of existence, you're basically repressing human productivity.
What creates wealth? People create wealth. The source of wealth is inside our head. It's our creativity, something we've been endowed with. Now, if human creativity is the source of wealth, then people are the source of wealth. And if you have a vast reservoir of poor people living in these slums we referred to, that is a source of untapped wealth that far exceeds the biggest oil reserves you could possibly find underneath your soil. That is really your source of wealth.